this is a really evolving sort of area, and I would say sort of controversial at this moment, particularly like with the SSRI or SNRI antidepressants and psilocybin. So I think what's not in question is like increased risks with lithium. So again, like lithium was contraindicated with MDMA, also contraindicated with psilocybin. Diminished subjective effects have been reported with many different medications that work in the serotonergic nervous system. And probably the ones that have the strongest evidence out there are the atypical antipsychotics or the serotonin 2A receptor blocking antipsychotics. And I think this class of medication, right, is a good example of something that has probably a pharmacodynamic interaction, but is also the type of class where I think about drug disease state interactions. Because when I think of atypical antipsychotics, I usually think of them as being used to treat psychotic conditions or bipolar types of conditions, which would potentially present a contraindication for psychedelic use in and of themselves. It's not universal because oftentimes they're used in lower doses as depression adjuncts, as sleep aids, and things like that. Particularly, you see atypical antipsychotics at higher doses or the mood stabilizer antipsychotic doses. Then I have double pause for concern because there's a pharmacodynamic interaction, but I wonder what kind of underlying illness there is too. Serotonin agonists, so this are things like buspirone. There's one anxiolytic medication, buspirone out there, which in one clinical experiment did reduce the effects of psilocybin. The serotonin reuptake blocking antidepressants, so these are your SSRI or SNRI types of medications. I know this is where the data is kind of controversial. You have some, I would say, like clinical studies with like press releases that haven't quite published yet, but have said that, well, you can combine SSRIs with psilocybin and the person will still get some kind of benefit. Or there was one randomized trial that combined Lexapro with psilocybin, and they pre-treated healthy volunteers with Lexapro for 2 weeks ahead of time, and found that some aspects of the psilocybin experience were diminished, but they were typically some of the more negative aspects rather than the sort of like positive or mystical kinds of aspects. The big flaw with that study is that they only gave people the Lexapro for 2 weeks, where it's commonly thought that you need to take it for 4 to 6 weeks to really get the therapeutic effect or for those neuroadaptive effects to occur. And I'm kind of thinking that, I mean, we saw the slide with the mechanism of action. There isn't a direct drug-drug interaction. So if there is an interaction, it has to probably be a result of some of these longer-term neuroadaptive sort of effects. So again, I don't even think it's published yet, but I just saw a preprint survey from Johns Hopkins that looked at people that had combined psilocybin with an SSRI antidepressant and or used psilocybin after discontinuing and stopping antidepressants. And, this is a survey, right? So there's methodologic limitations associated with it being a survey, but they found that about half the people reported that their SSRI diminished the effect of psilocybin in combination, whereas about 30% said that it didn't. And then the others weren't really sure about what happened. There was some very small that thought it potentiated it, but it was very, very small. And the people that had a diminished response, about that 50% that felt like the response was diminished, about half of them tried to overcome that diminished response by using higher doses of psilocybin mushrooms. And about 50% of the time, they were able to. So it seems that with psilocybin and those antidepressants, it is probably going to end up being an individual clinical decision, because it seems that on the one hand, it's probably not ideal to be taking SSRI antidepressants if you're undergoing psilocybin-assisted therapy, but you might still get an effect about a third of the time. And then, even if the response is diminished, there's a decent chance, about a coin flip, that we could overcome it with a higher dose. Whereas some persons, the prospect of going through a taper and washing out is quite daunting, or could actually be just dangerous for them to go down that kind of road, and you may actually opt to combine them at the beginning. So this is why this area is controversial and kind of like evolving and emerging, is that the approach isn't quite clear. And, personally, as a psychiatric clinician, I could just see individual situations where combining it makes a lot of sense versus, tapering off would also make a lot of sense for some individuals too. This was a weird one with the sort of standard types of antipsychotics, like the first ones that were ever came to market. Haloperidol is the one that they studied here. They found that it didn't really blunt the effects of psilocybin, but it made it more dysphoric. Some of the migraine agents, triptan types of migraine agents, can cause vasoconstriction. And in planned migraine studies, they avoid them in combination. There might be some pharmacokinetic interactions. I have some sort of question marks here around drugs that are known to change or modify the effects of those glucuronidyltransferase types of enzymes that psilocybin is metabolized by, but there's no formal data out there at the moment.